June 18, 1815. On a muddy field in Belgium, the fate of Europe is being decided. But while generals fight for land, one family is about to fight for something far more powerful. Not a throne, not an army. They will seize the one weapon no king understood: information itself. This is the story of how, in a single day, one banker supposedly turned a rumor into a fortune and gripped the wealth of an empire. Welcome to Dollar Sense AZ, where we tell the greatest stories ever told about money, power, and the people who learn to control both. This is the start of a new series, built on one of the most talked about finance books of our time, Currency Wars. Over the coming episodes, we'll travel from the back alleys of old Europe to secret meetings on private islands, following the hidden history of who really controls the money in your pocket. But here's my promise to you. I'll tell you the tale the way it's famously told, and then show you exactly where the history ends and the myth begins. Today, we begin where the book begins, with a single family that rose from a locked ghetto to the heart of an empire. This is episode 1. Parts of this story are legend, not fact. I'll show you exactly where the line is. But first, let me tell it the way the book tells it. It comes from a controversial bestseller, Currency Wars, and its boldest claim: that whoever controls a nation's money controls the nation itself. To understand that night in 1815, we have to go back to a narrow alley in Frankfurt and a man the world had overlooked. So how does a man overlooked by the world end up holding the purse strings of kings? To understand the night at Waterloo, we first have to meet the man who made it possible. 18th century Frankfurt. Jews were locked each night into a single crowded street, the Judengasse, walled off from the city. Here, a boy named Mayer Rothschild grew up surrounded by poverty and by something else: old coins and the secrets of money lending. Mayer became a dealer in rare coins and metals and learned that the rich would always open their doors to a man who knew their treasures. He courted collectors among the nobility, selling rare coins cheaply just to be noticed by the powerful. His patience paid off. Mayer won the trust of one of Europe's richest royals, Prince William of Hesse. The prince was famous for one thing above all. He rented out his soldiers as mercenaries and sat on a mountain of gold. Mayer made himself indispensable, managing the prince's money, his loans, his secrets. He was no longer a coin dealer. He was a banker to royalty. And Mayer learned the lesson that would define his family forever. Real power is not owning gold. It is controlling other people's gold. From a single shop bearing a red shield, in German, Rothschild, the family took its name and its emblem. Mayer had 5 sons, and as they grew, he saw not 5 boys, but 5 branches of a single empire. He told them a parable. A single arrow snaps easily, but 5 arrows bound together cannot be broken. His plan was breathtaking. Each son would leave for a different capital of Europe, and together they would build the first truly international bank. But he bound them with iron rules. Only the men would run the bank, the books would stay secret, and the family would marry within itself to keep the fortune whole. As Mayer's life neared its end, he gave his sons a final command: stay united, stay hidden, and never let the world see how much you truly hold. And so the arrows flew. 5 brothers, 5 cities, 1 secret pact. Rothschild in Frankfurt, Solomon in Vienna, Karl in Naples, James in Paris, and the boldest of them all, Nathan, to London. The father laid the foundation, but of all 5 sons, one would walk straight into the financial capital of the world and change his family's destiny forever. Let's follow the arrow that flew to London. Nathan Rothschild landed in England, a rough, blunt young man who barely spoke the language, and a fierce ambition burning behind his eyes. He started in Manchester, in the cotton trade, buying cheap, selling clever, undercutting everyone, multiplying his money again and again. Then he moved to London, the beating heart of global money, and turned from merchant into banker. Across the continent, his brothers did the same, and quietly, they wove their 5 houses into one web of credit no government could match. In Paris, the elegant James charmed kings and ministers, financing the very government that had just survived a revolution. In Vienna, Salomon won the ear of the empire's most powerful statesman, Prince Metternich himself. Karl tamed the kingdoms of Italy. Amschel held the family throne in Frankfurt. Between them, the brothers banked half of Europe's crowns. And this was an age of endless war. Napoleon's armies marched across the continent, and war, above all, runs on money. The book makes a striking claim. The brothers lent to all sides at once. For whoever won the war, the bankers would be repaid. Britain's great problem was gold. How to pay its armies fighting Napoleon far across Europe without the shipments being seized. Nathan offered the solution. Using his brother's network, he would move British gold secretly across enemy France to Wellington's army, and he pulled it off. It made Nathan something more than rich. It made him essential, the secret banker of the British war machine. But Nathan's deadliest asset wasn't gold, it was speed. The Rothschild couriers were the fastest in Europe. Coded letters, private ships, even carrier pigeons, they knew the news of Europe before kings did. In a world where news traveled by horse, knowing first was the same as printing money. So by the summer of 1815, Nathan Rothschild had gold, a spy network, and the trust of London's markets. All he needed was one decisive moment. That moment was coming. Napoleon had escaped exile and raised one last army. Everything would be decided near a Belgian village called Waterloo. For London's investors, the battle was everything. If Britain won, government bonds would soar. If Napoleon won, they would be worthless. And so the London Exchange waited, every trader desperate for one thing, to know the result first. The official news would crawl to London by government messenger, but Nathan's private couriers were already racing ahead through the night. A storm lashed the channel, ships were grounded, but a Rothschild courier paid a fortune to cross anyway. Hours before anyone in government, a single sealed letter reached Nathan's hands. He broke the seal. He read the words. Wellington had won. Napoleon was finished. And Nathan knew it before all of England. He had a choice: buy quietly and grow rich, or do something far more cunning and seize a fortune. Gold, a spy network, and the trust of an empire. Nathan now held every card he needed. All that remained was the single moment that would test them all. The next morning, Nathan walked onto the floor of the London Stock Exchange, calm, silent, unreadable. Every eye turned to him. For everyone knew the truth. If anyone in London learned the result of Waterloo first, it would be Nathan Rothschild. He took his place against his favorite pillar, where he always traded, and did nothing. He let the silence work. Then, at last, he moved. He gave a single, quiet signal to his brokers, and they began to sell British bonds. The floor froze. Nathan was selling. Nathan, who always knew first. There could be only one meaning. Britain must have lost. Napoleon must have won. And panic detonated across the floor. Everyone scrambled to sell before the crash. Bonds were dumped at any price. The avalanche fed itself. The price of British bonds fell and fell until they were nearly worthless. And through it all, Nathan stood against his pillar, perfectly calm. Because this was exactly what he wanted. Because at the very bottom, when bonds were trash and terror was total, the trap was about to spring. At Nathan's silent command, his other agents, unknown to the crowd, began quietly buying. every cheap bond they could reach. They bought what panicked men were throwing away, soaking up a fortune in paper, for pennies. Hour after hour, the fear held. No one suspected that the man who triggered the panic was the one quietly buying. Then, at last, the government's own messenger burst in, a full day late, with the real news. Wellington had won, Napoleon was crushed, Britain was victorious, and the floor realized, too late, what had happened. Bonds exploded back in value, higher than ever, and every one of them, bought at the bottom, now belonged to Nathan. The book claims that in that single day, Nathan multiplied his fortune some 20 times over. In one stroke, he had become the single most powerful financier in Britain. The book goes further still, claiming this victory gave the Rothschilds a controlling grip over the Bank of England itself. If true, it meant a single family could now influence the money of the most powerful empire on earth. And here the book gives Nathan its most chilling line: "I care not what puppet is placed upon the throne of England to rule the empire. The man who controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the British money supply." True or not, that one sentence is the entire idea of currency wars. Real power does not sit on the throne. It sits with whoever controls the money. From a walled ghetto to the heart of empire in a single generation, the Rothschild name now meant money itself. Across Europe, the brothers now financed governments, railways, an empire with no flag of its own. The book calls it an invisible empire, its power measured not in land, but in debt that nations owed to them. Some authors would later claim the family's hidden wealth grew beyond anything the public could imagine. And the more powerful they became, the more carefully they stayed out of sight, exactly as their father had taught them. Over the next century, the story of that day at Waterloo would be told and retold, until it became legend. But here, we have to stop the story and ask the most important question of all: how much of it actually happened? It's a breathtaking story. But now comes the part most people never hear, where we separate what truly happened from what was invented. Now I have to be straight with you, because that's what this channel is about. That thrilling version you just heard? Historians say much of it is myth. So let's separate what really happened from what was invented. Because the truth is fascinating in its own way. True, the Rothschilds were real, and genuinely one of the most powerful banking families in history. True, their 5-city network was real, and their private courier system really was among the fastest in Europe. True, Nathan very likely did learn of Waterloo's outcome before the British government. And true, he ran a genuinely brilliant operation, moving gold across Europe to fund Wellington's army. That part is real and remarkable. But the dramatic core, deliberately crashing the market and making 20 times his money in a day? There is no solid evidence it happened that way. Serious historians find Nathan's actual Waterloo profits were real, but far more modest, and some evidence suggests the early news may not have helped him as the legend claims. So where did the dramatic version come from? The answer is uncomfortable and important. Much of it traces to a cheap pamphlet published in France in 1846, decades after Waterloo, written to attack the Rothschilds. And here's the part we cannot skip. That pamphlet, and many later versions, were fueled by anti-Semitism, using the family's wealth to spread hatred of Jewish people. That matters, because the same exaggerated stories about bankers secretly controlling the world have been used to justify real persecution. So we tell the tale, but we name the lie inside it. And yet the legend itself became powerful. Even if the trick never happened, millions came to believe it. And belief shapes history too. That is exactly why a book like Currency Wars sold millions of copies. It tells a gripping story about hidden power, one many people already wanted to believe. So understanding this myth isn't a waste of time. It's how you understand the world that believes it and protect yourself from being misled. The honest verdict: the Rothschilds were brilliant, genuinely powerful bankers. But the supervillain version, the puppet masters of the world, is mostly myth. So let's give them their real legacy, which is impressive enough without the myths. The Rothschilds helped pioneer the modern international bond market, letting governments borrow across borders on a scale never seen before. They financed nations through wars and peace, funded railways and industry, and helped build the financial plumbing of modern Europe. Their true genius wasn't a single trick at Waterloo. It was a system, coordinated, international, and built on superior information. And that one idea is the real lesson of their rise. In finance, the fastest, best-informed player wins. There was one more secret to their endurance: an iron family discipline that kept the fortune together for generations. They almost never published their accounts. They settled disputes privately. They let the world guess at their wealth, and guessing made it seem even larger. And following Mayer's rules, the family often married within itself, so the fortune would never be split apart. When Nathan died, the empire didn't. The houses passed to sons and grandsons, and the name carried on across the 19th century. And precisely because they were so private and so successful, the name Rothschild became a magnet for legends, some admiring, many dark. And that brings us to why this story opens an entire book about money and power. Because the questions it raises don't end in 1815. Who should control a nation's money? A government answerable to the people, or private banks answerable to no one? It's a question as old as banking itself, and one that, as we'll see in this series, shaped wars, presidents, and empires. The Rothschilds were only the beginning. The idea they perfected, that controlling credit means controlling power, would cross the ocean to America. So what should you actually take from this? First, information has always been the ultimate financial weapon. Whoever knows first wins. Second, markets move on belief as much as on facts. A single trusted move can start a stampede in either direction. And third, always separate the story from the evidence, especially when the story is this good. That habit will protect your mind and your money. That's what this whole series is about. Telling the great stories of money and power and being honest about which parts are true. Because the truth is, you don't need a secret conspiracy to explain why money is power. The open, documented history is dramatic enough. But the questions the Rothschilds raised about who really controls a nation's money were about to erupt in a brand new country, the United States. Next time on Dollar Sense AZ, we travel to 1910 and a secret meeting on a private island where a handful of the most powerful bankers in America gathered in total secrecy. Disguised as a duck hunting trip, they drafted the plan for America's central bank, the Federal Reserve. And the way they did it will stun you. If you want the real story behind the money in your pocket, subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss it. And tell me in the comments, do you think Nathan really pulled off that trick at Waterloo? Or is it just a legend that grew too good to die? Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. Long ago, a family understood that the quiet power over money outlasts any crown. And that idea still runs the world today. This has been Dollar Sense AZ. Stay curious and stay sharp with your money. I'll see you in the next one.